Hello, everybody, and welcome to VFR. Today, we are here at Boulder City Municipal Airport, just south of Las Vegas, Nevada. And we are going to be doing some Grand Canyon Airlines ops in the new Aerosoft Twin Otter. We'll be flying out to Grand Canyon National Park Airport and do a little lap of some sightseeing in the national park. So, as you may have heard, the Twin Otter was recently released for Microsoft Flight Simulator. This was one of Aerosoft's flagship development projects, really going back to the earlier days of the sim. It's a high-wing twin turboprop airplane. It's fairly unique in its layout and compared to other airplanes of similar type and role. Designed as a STOL utility airplane and small commercial commuter airplane. It can hold 19 passengers and lots of cargo. Max takeoff weight of 12,500 pounds. It's mostly used for a ton of different operations: regional flying, commercial seaplane operations, remote cargo ops, and bush flying and skydiving, all of which we can simulate pretty effectively here in Flight Simulator. Now, the Twin Otter was developed in the 1960s by de Havilland Canada. It was based off of the DHC-3 Otter. Now, if you imagine this with one of these engines on the nose and clear wings, that's about what you have with the DHC-3 Otter. Now, they basically took a prototype where they said, well, we have this Otter, what if we put two engines on the wings and made it a twin turboprop? That was pretty effective, looked pretty good, and they put it into development and creatively named it the Twin Otter. So you have two twin PT6A Pratt & Whitney turboprop engines on the wings, which gives it a lot more versatility and redundancy in terms of commercial flying. Now, it starts out with the Dash 100, which has kind of a stubbier nose, in part to help counter the aerodynamic effects of putting floats on it if they wanted to. So they were certified for certain floats back in the day. And then the Dash 300 basically adds more horsepower to the engines and a longer nose with cargo space in the nose for more cargo space. Now, this went out of production in the late 80s, I believe, and then a company called Viking bought the rights and all the tooling to produce it. Again, pretty recently in the 2010s. So they are now producing new Twin Otters, Viking Twin Otters, which are Dash 400s. We don't have that, but it'll have a glass cockpit. But again, the basic design has remained the same, really, since the beginning. You got a max speed of about 160 to 170 knots, depending on your, if you're in a Dash 100, Dash 300. And we have 13 variants in the sim. So you have passenger, you have cargo, you have different wheel configurations. We have the standard wheels, but you get Tundra wheels on it. You can also get skis, floats, or an amphibian version. And there's also the Dash 100 and Dash 300 that we can fly. Relatively famous, I think the most famous Twin Otter mission is probably the medevac rescues from the South Pole. So there have been several over the last 20 years where Twin Otters have flown into the South Pole Research Station and evacuated medical patients in dead winter. So in the middle of winter, they've done it first in 2001, and then they've done it twice more the last time. It was in 2016. So very rugged, very capable for those kinds of very unforgiving bush operations, but also is equally comfortable in kind of island hopping and short commercial operations, regional flying like that. So again, we've got two twin turboprop. So again, we have two turboprop engines on the wings. It's a big, long or wide square wing, which again really helps it with low speed performance and STOL capabilities. STOL is a big part of this, so it has a 1,200-foot takeoff roll, published, and a 1,000-foot landing roll. Again, published, so that's pretty impressive. Now, Grand Canyon Airlines in the real world has the Viewliner version, which has bigger windows. But we don't have that one, but this will do just fine. We can suspend our disbelief. We're also running the Daily Air Corporation mail, or livery, off flightsim.to, because that's kind of what's available. We're still pretty early in the life cycle of the Twin Otter. So I liked the colors, and that kind of fits the Rocky Mountain aesthetic that I wanted to go for. The other big thing, we've got a high wing with struts, kind of like a Cessna 172, upscaled all the way, and then which is a relatively uncommon design these days. And then you have fixed landing gear, so no retractable landing gear here. Your gear's always down, and it has aerodynamic penalties, but it's easier on maintenance, and it is a unique feature of this airplane. All right, so we're getting up into the cockpit here. We are still boarding the passengers. We're going to be running a fully loaded Twin Otter today. We're right at max takeoff weight of around 12,400 pounds with 19 passengers in the back. And we're currently running off external power so I can set up the GPS. Now, following the text, we are going to make sure that our parking brakes are set. Pulled out, we'll remove the control locks. Fuel switches are normal. These handles are pushed in. Fuel boost pumps are off. So engine start. And again, this is not the most complicated airplane to start. It's pretty straightforward. We are going to hit the start to the right, but you will have to do some view jumping. So custom views help. We can see the shadow flashing. Once we're at 14%, we can hop up to the top panel and just click the fuel button to give fuel into the engine. And I don't know if we can see it, but make sure that these gauges keep climbing and we're in the green everywhere. We do the same thing now for the left engine. And then hopping on up to the fuel lever, put that forward. Go ahead and close the doors, and we'll hop back into the back and close the passenger door too. So again, custom views, as you're hopping all around the airplane, these click spots are kind of all over, especially for the doors. So I have a bunch of quick views set up, basically for this panel, this windshield panel, and then kind of like DC-6 down on the engine panel and GPS and everything like that. And then this quick view goes down to the cabin, and then I think we have a wing view as well. So engine starts are on. We're going to make sure that our generators go to on. Engine instruments going to be within limits. We're looking pretty good here. So the green, everything is alive. Caution lights are, I'm okay with the brightness of those. Our altimeter, looks like it's 3008. We'll check the ATIS here in a second and make sure that's right, or the AWOS. And then we'll turn on the rest of our anti-collision lights. Now I'm following the checklist that comes in the manual, but you can also go into the checklists here and pull it up, and you've got all these checklists, particularly before start and engine start. Okay, so we're here holding short runway 15 here at Boulder. We are going to be basically departing off of 15. We're going to take a left-hand turn and going to follow the magenta line out towards Bogey. We're really looking for Lake Mead. It's about 50 miles. Now, we're going to run the before takeoff checklist real quick. Fuel pumps, making sure those are on. Should have been on for engine start too. Trim tab, we're going to set this to 10 degrees. They've got a nice little takeoff line there. Flight instruments, we are checked. Our Navicom radios, the big one, we're going to be trying to track a radial outbound from Boulder, which is going to be BDU, which is on 116.7. And then I'm just also going to tune in Grand Canyon, which is going to be the next one at 111.65. And that one's going to be 063 outbound for about 45 nautical miles. Again, we can follow Bogey too, but it's just kind of a backup to see how far out we are. Propeller levers are full forward. Auto feather has been selected. Flaps, we're going to set one notch of flaps. That'll be between 10 and 20. Engines are looking okay. Pitot heat can come on. Transponder, we're going to squawk VFR. Landing lights are on. Caution lights are appropriate, and we're going to be taking off on runway 15. So as we roll out, we'll check the runway heading. Then once we climb out, we'll go flaps up, auto feather off, climb power, we'll set that, and then landing lights can come off. Best rate of climb is going to be 85 knots. It's really going to shoot off the runway, so we will probably end up going faster than that. We're going to be climbing up to about 9,500 feet today. And we're just going to go full power. And we'll rotate really around 70 to 80 knots. Takes a bit of left rudder to stay on. And there it is, rotating away. Climbing out, we'll put flaps up. Let the rudder come back to center. And you see just how we shoot away from the runway. That's what makes this airplane really, really capable for STOL operations. And we're fully loaded. We are away. I'm just going to come back on the power just a touch. We'll now go ahead and climb out. We do have some terrain to consider ourselves, but should have no problem clearing it. Las Vegas is going to be off to our left, just a few miles up the road from where we are. So we are basically tracking out over Lake Mead, which is here west, or here to the east of Las Vegas. That's McCarran Las Vegas International Airport there in the center. We're going to be climbing out over Lake Mead, basically out here until we hit Bogey, this waypoint here. We're going to go a little bit past that to this lake right here, or this continuation of the lake. On the other side of that, we will then turn right, 086, and then we will head 89 nautical miles inbound towards Grand Canyon, and we can track the GCN Grand Canyon VOR inbound. And then we'll basically fly over the airport 9,500 feet. We'll descend down to 9,000 feet to enter this kind of loop, which, if we look at the Grand Canyon VFR chart, we have all these no-flight zones. These purple areas are places where you can't fly. We also have a Point Imperial, which is a no-fly zone. So we're going to avoid all those areas by following these VFR waypoints. VPCGCH. There's also visual references associated with them, but we're going to be following those. That's what's programmed into the waypoint. The only one we'll have to think about is up here. We need to just turn a little bit further to the north than our GPS is going to say. If we just follow directly, we'll clip Point Imperial. So we'll be following this route, and if you go on SkyVector, you can pull up the Grand Canyon Tour Ops chart. And this kind of shows you the routes that Grand Canyon tour operators and helicopters and fixed-wing airplanes all use. There's a key over here. We're coming in Blue Direct North route, which specifies that we should be flying at 9,500 feet, heading towards Grand Canyon. And then we're going to get on to one of the black routes, kind of around the area. Not exactly, but fairly close. Okay, so we're coming up on our first visual reference. Right out here is the body of water. We're going to basically put it into heading mode. We're going to follow it just a little bit past where the GPS waypoint is, and then we'll turn right and try and pick up the VOR. We haven't yet, so we'll make a right-hand turn just past the lake to, I believe, 083. So like I said before, the Twin Otter is a pretty unique airplane, but it's really, I think it's really remarkable primarily because of the roles that it fills. It's this is a plane where the mission profiles that it has in the real world are some of the most compelling parts about the airframe. I mean, you can do a lot of things. It's obviously famous for remote operations in Antarctica with the British Antarctic Survey, as well as supplying U.S. bases and other bases in Antarctica and the South Pole and doing winter medevacs and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's also was very common and is still somewhat common, flying almost small commercial operations, small commuter airlines with 4 or 5 planes, flying between a couple of different cities, city link kinds of airlines, which is interesting. So you could see Twin Otters flying into major international airports, into smaller regional airports, and if it's an hour flight time or an hour and a half between a small airport and a larger airport, Twin Otter would be a realistic choice for it. And there are several kind of defunct airlines that flew Twin Otters between major cities, kind of across the U.S. and across the world. U.S., U.K., Germany, all sorts of places, and they're still used for cargo and passengers in that kind of, I don't want to say civilized, but in that kind of world. That said, it's also very common as a passenger airplane in all sorts of tropical islands. That might be the most compelling thing. We might do a tour of some different island areas with the Twin Otter, and that's really fun to open that up too. The float plane variants and seaplane variants has a whole other layer to that, but also just regular wheeled passenger flights and service between different island airports. That's a common mission for the Twin Otter. Again, we talked about seaplanes, float planes. I mean, Twin Otters are some of the most common commercial float planes as well, still in service. So if you want to do that float plane commercial flying, Twin Otter is a good call for you. Sightseeing, like the flight we're on today, Grand Canyon Airlines. If you wanted to have your own virtual fictional sightseeing business, you could absolutely do that in a Twin Otter, put 19 people in the back and go show them around the world. That would be a really cool mission set for the Twin Otter. And then finally, we have bush operations as well. If you're a bush pilot and you want to carry a lot of cargo, we published a video about the King Air short field operations. This would do a lot of the same things, but better than the King Air. Yeah, and that's really interesting. So if you want to fly bush planes in Alaska, Antarctica, in the desert, wherever, harsh environments, that's a really, really compelling mission set for the Twin Otter. The other thing that I've really enjoyed about it and I like is I like the panel. I like the cockpit. I like the layout. I like that the door's all open, and it's little things like that. I like kind of how it's unique in that you've got these overhead throttle and prop RPM levers. That's not something you see all the time. Flaps on the roof. It's just a very unique kind of airplane, and it has just a pinch of DC-6 in the panel, in the cockpit, but just almost modernized and more easy to understand. At its core, this airplane's relatively simple to operate. It's a turboprop airplane. You're basically setting the power lever and maybe pulling a little bit of prop RPM off. It just depends on what you need, and you can tailor it for for conserve fuel, but it's not the most complex plane to operate. It's a relatively simple plane to fly and operate. You can set it up, get it going, and that's compelling to me as someone who likes the mission set, who likes the aesthetics of the cockpit. The fact that it's fairly simple to fly and simple to start up and simple to use. I mean, it's just a GA 430 GPS system and autopilot. It's not the most fully featured suite in the world. And it's probably also not the deepest simulation in the world. I'm okay with that because I really like those other things about the Twin Otter. And the fact that I can hop in it, run the checklist fairly easily, and knock off whatever rust was on me is very compelling. All right, we're going to make our right-hand turn now to about 083. We may go due east as well. And you see the Grand Canyon opening off to our right. And we are now formally over the Grand Canyon. We'll come off the power a little bit, let some of the, make sure our passengers get their money's worth watching these views go by. So again, this is kind of a unique mission set, skydiving, unique mission set. And if you're interested in a bush plane, Twin Otter could be for you. It's the short field and takeoff and landing capabilities are quite impressive. You'll shoot up into the air and you will land very, very short, and it's really night and day compared to something like a King Air with a similar capability level. I think the bottom line with the Twin Otter is if you like the mission set, if you like the mission profiles, if that's something that excites you and sounds interesting to you, the different things that you can do with it, I think you'll really like the Twin Otter. If you don't care so much about the mission profiles, I don't know if it's for you. If you're looking for the most detailed, realistic simulation of a Twin Otter ever made, this probably isn't it. Right, there are some issues, there are some autopilot things, there's some sound things, there's some systems things where, especially with feathering the prop, I've heard, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the subject. But if you're looking for a blow-by-blow detailed simulation of the Twin Otter, I don't know if this is for you. I think there's a lot of other airplanes in this kind of world and family that are also good. But if the mission set interests you for the Twin Otter and you like the aesthetics and you like everything with it, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. It's a lot of fun to fly. It's a good plane to hop into and fly. It's not that complicated of an airplane. And that's, at this point, for an airplane like this, I think that's a benefit for me in my flight simming. You know, I am happy to invest some time in the CRJ to stay current and the 737 whenever that comes out. But, yeah, it's nice to have an airplane where a checklist, you can follow it, get up and running pretty quickly, and still fly some pretty technical operations. A lot of fun. That's a quick navigational note. We picked up the Grand Canyon Viora. We're about 55 nautical miles away from it. So we are going to, I've gone over to VLOC and we're going to follow that instead. We're pretty much bang on the radial. We're tracking 086 inbound towards GC. And that should take us right over the airfield, and then we'll make a left-hand turn and kind of fly around the Grand Canyon a little bit more. Quick fuel check. We're looking okay. We have about 500 pounds of fuel in both tanks. So we're making pretty good time here. All right, so we're coming up on Grand Canyon Airport here, Grand Canyon National Park Airport. Got some custom freeware scenery installed there, but we'll see it on the way back. We're basically going to fly past it. We're going to go back onto our GPS waypoints and do a little bit of a loop around Grand Canyon, around some of the VFR corridors out of the Grand Canyon. All right, so we are out over the Grand Canyon now, and we are flying through the Zuni Point Corridor. This is taking us to the north. We will basically head up towards, following the Colorado River up to the north, and then at the next waypoint we will turn left. We'll fly over Saddle Mountain, and then down through Dragon Bravo in the Dragon Corridor. Back south towards Grand Canyon National Park will come into land. Alright, so we've made our turnaround. We're now on our way down south through the Dragon Corridor. This is going to take us back. We're going to descend down to 8,500 feet. We've got it nailed in here in the autopilot. We'll descend at about 1,000 feet per minute and come back with the power a little bit. So we're heading back through the Dragon Corridor, and this will basically spit us back out right next to Grand Canyon National Park. We will enter the pattern, come in, land, and let our passengers get on their way. So what do you need to know to fly the Twin Otter? Well, I think the first thing is an understanding of the STOL capabilities: 1,000 foot takeoff roll, 1,200 foot landing roll, and again, that's published, so you might even be able to do better than that. Flaps are going to be important, as well as your approach speed. So I've found that that's one of the trickier aspects of this plane, is the approach speed. You can have a few different landing configurations. You can do set flaps 10, or 10 to 20, really. It's more than 10, but flaps 10, approach at about a reference of about 80 knots. Or you can go flaps 37.5, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 ticks. And then you're approaching at 73 knots. Now, on final approach, it is very easy to get into a position where you get very slow very quickly. So on final, you may need more power than you think. Just watch your speed and make sure you're not going below the red line. It's very easy to find yourself stalling out low, and if you're not careful about that, that's one of the quirks of flying this plane. It happens very quickly. You'll go from a good reference speed of 73 or 80, and it'll just dip down to 60, and you'll be stalling out onto the runway. It's not great. So stalls suddenly, especially with full flaps and low speed. Just be careful not to get too slow. The other thing, set up custom views or some kind of custom view. I don't know what the instrument views are like. I'm sure they're good too. But I have basically my number pad set for custom views, and I can cycle between all of the weird different places that stuff is. Like this back panel, the door latch, we have a window view. So that is also, that's something that I really recommend, is finding some system to set up views so that you can see all the stuff in the cockpit. And there's not that much you actually have to see, especially compared to something like the DC-6. It's almost similar, but it's a lot. There's fewer things going on, so you can switch between the custom views a lot easier. The other thing, just keep an eye on the autopilot. It's a little confusing. The autopilot unit's down here. This is the autopilot that you're using. This is so IAS doesn't do anything. And this is really just a repeater for this autopilot unit. So just keep an eye on that. I have had some issues with it capturing altitude, so but it's worked actually very nicely today. So yeah, if you just play around with the autopilot in a non-stressful situation, and just make sure you understand how that works. It can be a little finicky. There's also a couple of bugs outstanding. I'm sure they'll fix them soon, like the tracking outbound radials isn't working quite right. And other things like that. So that's something to consider as you're flying this plane. The other thing, control-wise, it's the only plane that I'm really using a separate throttle, 2 different throttle axes. So I have a Gladiator NXT with a THQ add-on, which basically just gives me 3 levers that I'm using to control the power. Usually I do a throttle, mixture, prop, but because these are on-off, your fuel flow is on-off. No mixture to worry about, so I use two throttle levers, so I can control these independently. It's not a huge deal, but it does help if you can, especially for amphibious operations. It can help you turn around and be a little bit more maneuverable in that respect. So Grand Canyon Airport should be off to our left, and it is right there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and disengage the autopilot. We'll take control. And get ready to land. The wind still 255 at 6 knots. So if we look at Grand Canyon Airport, we have a 0-3 and 2-1. I think we'll come into 2-1, which is basically off of, which is basically the way closest to us. So we'll loop around. We'll do a bit of a teardrop, enter the downwind, and then we'll go ahead and land on up. Field elevation 6,600 feet. So we need to descend down to about 7,600 feet. So I'm just before landing, we're putting prop RPM all the way forward. And that's really it. We'll put flaps down. I'll probably do flaps 10 today. We've got plenty of runway. I'm not real worried about that right now. As far as other planes that are like this, there are a few. I think this is one area where we have a few different options for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Default planes, it's similar in kind of configuration to the King Air. King Air is faster and not as STOL capable, but it doesn't hold as many passengers. But you can think of it kind of in the same family as a King Air type aircraft. Cessna Grand Caravan, again, if you're looking for kind of a people and cargo hauler for bush and short field and kind of commuter operations, Grand Caravan's also another one you can look at. Now, as far as third-party add-ons, there's a few actually. If you're looking for twin engine, you have the EMB 110, and you have the Britten Normand Islander, which fill a few of the same roles as this aircraft. So you can see a lot of those airplanes doing similar things. The other, and I haven't flown any of those two, but the other ones are the single-engine options that kind of do the bush short field type thing. The Milviz PC-6 Porter, which is a very well-done, in-depth systems, well-modeled airplane. And so if you're looking for that in a bush plane, you might be interested in the PC-6 Porter by Milviz. And the Simwork Studios Kodiak 100 also came out. It is a glass cockpit, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it is an option if you are if you're looking for a plane to kind of fill this kind of role, especially for bush flying or even some commercial options. Yeah, definitely an airplane to consider. Alright, so there's the airport off to our right. We can actually probably come in a little bit further, a little bit tighter. And we will we'll get configured, set up in the pattern, and we'll bring this thing into land. Run downwind now, just a little bit high, but we can bring our first notch of flaps in, and that's going to be all we're going to use today. And we're giving a little bit of power, but we just want to manage the descent. So again, this is an airplane that you can find yourself maybe pulling back on the stick a little bit to try and keep it up in the air. And that's going to just be careful about reducing your speed. We're now a bit past the field. Looks like we have a little bit more traffic on final. But we'll turn base. And we're shooting for an approach VREF of about 80 knots. And we may need some power just to maintain altitude. We are still pretty heavily loaded, even with almost no fuel. Again, just a touch fast. So there's the runway. And we can just start, and again, just power management, just find the right spot to keep it at about 80 knots. See, and I'm almost stalling out in the turn, so that stall horn will go off. It is helpful. And we're coming down. Poppy's saying we're a bit high. We'll make sure we get the line up. GPWS, ground proximity warning system. There is a mod if you want to disable it, but I don't really care too much. Still showing we're high, but we're on about 84, 83 knots.
Too low, flaps.
Yelling at me for flaps.
Minimums, too low, flaps.
There's the threshold. We're a little off to the right. If you really want to stop, slam on the brakes, slam on the reversers. We're not going to do that because I don't want us to come to a complete stop here on the taxiway, but... And then to get back out of it, just bump it in. There is a little sound oddity that happens when you go into reversers, but I'm hoping they'll fix that. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Grand Canyon National Park Airport. We're going to taxi on up to parking and get our passengers off on their way into the park. All right, welcome everybody to Grand Canyon National Park. We are here on the ground. Passengers are unloading and getting on their way. And yeah, it's a fun airplane. And again, I think if you like the mission set of the Twin Otter, if the things that I've described all in one package sound really interesting to you, I think you will definitely like this plane. If you're looking for a heavy-duty systems airplane, I don't know if it's for you. It may not be. So I think it's really interesting for me. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, it's just a really fun, kind of versatile plane to fly and can do a lot of stuff. And yeah, it's really, really cool. The capabilities are really cool. The model's really nice. I love the panel and the aesthetics, and I like operating it. And I can see us flying this quite a bit for a lot of different things. So with that, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, experiences of your own with the Twin Otter or any other similar aircraft, drop in the comment section below. As always, this has been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.